Common Knowledge is brought to you by PureMTGO.com and InkedGaming.com. Use coupon code CCMTG10 at checkout for a 10% discount on all Inked Gaming supplies and accessories. You can support the show directly through Patreon at patreon.com/common knowledge.
This is the Common Knowledge Podcast. It's not about the cost, it's about the knowledge. Here are your hosts, Brandon Clark and Lobbert.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode 71 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon, and joined with me is Evan Carr's Justice himself.
What?
Not the Lobbert.
What makes me that?
Well, you're like the mono black person. Like that's your thing, man. And today we're talking about blue-black controls, so it's a perfect segue into today's topic, which is our deep dive on the deck of the month, blue-black control.
I think it's
if
okay.
you were in the multiverse of Magic the Gathering, you know, you'd just have like a black executioner's mask on. Evan Carr would be yelling at you to go murder people. You know, you'd be his justice.
Dispense justice. Oh, okay, I think it's a stretch, but if you say so.
I don't know. I was just looking at the card, so that's what you were.
How are you this week?
Good. Excited to talk about this deck so that we can play something else.
Really? I really like this one, and I wanted this to keep going.
I've really liked it too, but I'm sick of having hard games.
I didn't have any of those.
Oh, well, look at you.
It's funny, but you should ask me how my week is going.
All right, how's your week going?
I found episode 1 through 11 on YouTube, so I added those to the playlist. So if you feel like torturing yourself, those are now more readily available. I wouldn't recommend any of them. I didn't even join the podcast until episode 7, so everything before that is just flat out unwatchable. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I added all of those and I made a couple of tweaks. I'm always like spending way more time on something that no one will ever notice for this podcast than anyone ever realizes. But that's how I've been spending my week.
Sweet, let's get into it. Let's talk our card of the week.
Card of the week.
So you chose this one, and I had no opposition. We haven't done a white card in a while, so we're doing Thraben Inspector. Thraben Inspector is a single white mana for a 1/2 human soldier. When Thraben Inspector enters the battlefield, investigate, which means you make a clue that is a 0 mana artifact that you can pay 2 mana, sacrifice it, and draw a card. You can do that at instant speed. So why is this our card of the week, Brandon?
Well, we haven't done a white card in a while. I at first suggested Core Skyfisher, and then Sean reminded me that on episode 12 we did Core Skyfisher, so that was like, Thraben Inspector, just thinking of good white cards. But no, this one actually has a good discussion point, because this is something that I actually encountered recently on Magic Online, is the decision point between turn 1 Thraben Inspector into like turn 2 Glinthawk. And the decision there is sort of like, what do you bounce? Like, do you bounce the land or do you bounce the clue? Like, assuming that your land is an artifact land, right?
Yeah.
And there's actually a decision, because otherwise the decision is just bounce your only artifact, which is probably your clue. But oftentimes you'll see that just like they'll have the artifact land, and I've seen a lot of people just bounce their clue so that they don't go so far behind on tempo. And I just like kind of made a mental note of like, that's sort of an interesting decision point that maybe I want to talk to Sean about.
Yeah, I think it just is 100% whatever deck you're playing against. Like, obviously against like Stompy, you want that tempo. But then something that's like a control deck, you might just flat out hang on to your Glinthawk idol. I guess if not idol, there's Glinthawk and there's Glinthawk idol, and I always put the word idol on there for no reason, and it's a terrible card.
Glinthawk idol was great in Modern Masters 2015 draft.
That's not Pauper.
Well, it's common, isn't it?
I don't even know. But yeah, in control matchups, like I think your decision point is like, well, if I play this, maybe I can get out ahead, make them have to spend some time catching up with my tempo I just gained by putting a 1-mana 2/2 out there. And so it is a really complex little decision point, and I don't think I can make a definite rule, but it's like you have to gauge how fast your hand is, how fast is your opponent, and where your priorities lie.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. It's just got to depend on the matchup you're in, like the context of your hand. Like, yeah, I don't think that there's actually even a clear-cut answer or even like a default, like, this is the way to do it, like X% of the time. Like, that sometimes exists. Like, shortcuts like that sometimes exist. Like, with Gush, it existed. Gush in your main phase. There were some outliers, but I don't think anything like this exists for, like, this particular interaction. I think that it's all just context dependent.
Right. And I know that when I've played this card in the decks it's good in, and my own brews, those clues really do pile up a lot of the time. If you have more than one Thraben Inspector, you're bouncing this to a Core Skyfisher, anything like that, I've had 4 or 5 clues out there, and I've just had action, so I didn't have time to pop those clues, and so maybe bouncing one for a little bit of tempo is worth it, because then you're a turn ahead instead of 6 turns later you would have been able to pop that.
I do think that is a good note. This is probably a hard and fast rule. Bounce your Thraben Inspector with your Core Skyfisher, not the clue.
Yeah, if you have the option, just go for the Thraben Inspector for sure.
Like, the reason it's a discussion with Glinthawk is because it has to specifically be an artifact, but I have seen people bounce their Thraben Inspector, or not bounce their Thraben Inspector with Core Skyfisher, and they bounce their clue, and I'm just like, yes! I'm going to win this game.
Yeah, those clues are like, they're worth it if you have artifact destruction. A lot of the time I will like smash to smithereens them. If I don't have an artifact land to blow up, I will point a smash to smithereens at a clue. Like, no problem.
Yeah. Obviously, like, as long as they're tapped below 2.
Right. You don't want to fizzle your own spell by just playing poorly.
Yeah,
but sometimes
I knew that you knew that. I just wanted to make sure the listeners knew that you knew that.
No, yeah, that's
good.
We'll
have someone. Well, you can't do it if they have mana up.
Yeah. But there's really cool things you can do. I mean, I'm just starting to play against this card in my mind more than I'm actually trying to like to actually like promote it. Where like I will a lot of the time wait, and then end of turn they'll obviously go for a clue, and then I'm like, oh sweet, get their other clue. But for a 1-mana spell, this just puts in so much work. Like it makes these complex decisions where we actually have to think about it. That's usually not something that comes with a 1-mana spell.
Yeah. And this body itself is a little undercosted too for a 1-mana creature. Like, even just on the vanilla test, it's a 1/2. And we've talked about it before, and, we're going to keep beating this horse, but anything more than 1, like in this format, is so relevant, because it's hard to find strong creatures with more than 1 toughness in this format that are like, going to generate you the kind of value that a Thraben Inspector is going to generate you. The other card that this is comparable to in my mind is Fairy Miscreant, 1 drop that generates advantage. But this card is just like kind of on a different power level than Fairy Miscreant in my mind. Like, I would say that this is the more powerful 1 drop.
Yeah, and then I think it goes to show how powerful this is. Like, if you compare the next most powerful white 1 drop, the gap there is just giant. Like, it's not close.
Laguna Band Trailblazer?
Yeah, they all become like incredibly niche, like
Yeah.
the guy that gives protection or something like that, or
Sure.
the guy that has provoke, and all of those are also 1 toughness creatures.
The bodyguard.
There's benevolent bodyguard
Benevolent
was the one.
bodyguard.
Then it's like Deftblade Elite is the provoke one.
Yeah, the power level is really dispersed there, but yeah, Thraben Inspector is just, even outside of its own color, like just in Pauper, this is like in the argument for one of the most powerful 1-drops in this game, or in this format.
Definitely. And I know that the having 2 toughness and the amount of bears that we have to fight, just 2 twos, it's a lot. And if you stack block 2 of these, you're only going to lose 1. Both of them have already gotten their advantage because you have this clue that at some point you're going to get a card out of. Like,
stack blocking these against Stompy,
mm-hmm.
like just like double block a bear, that feels so good, right?
Even if they use a pump spell, you're up a card.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's really like rivaled in terms of like how good your 1-drop is. Like, this is what you want to do in like Boros Monarch. I want to say like every time.
Yeah, I mean their other most powerful turn 1 play is probably Windscarred Crag.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, I guess, I don't know, lightning bolt something, but I'd still rather be doing this for sure.
And they hold back Augur of Bolas all day. That's like one of their main uses. Is your opponent's usually going to have an Augur of Bolas, and then you just are like, okay, I have my Thraben Inspector, and since they're good against bounce, like your opponent really doesn't want to like bounce them to clear a path for their ninja. That's like trading their bounce for, like, they're cycling their bounce. You get another card if you're playing your Thraben Inspector again, and they get another card if you actually cleared a path for your like ninja. So I think this just matches up super great against really most of the meta.
Yep. All right, that's card of the week, Thraben Inspector. Let's just main topic time.
Main topic.
All right, cool. So we're going to be talking blue-black control. Now, this is the deck that Sean and I decided that we were going to play last month, and it's the deck that we've been playing for the last 4 weeks. I think our decks have changed, evolved from our original list. At least mine has a little bit. And just looking at Sean's deck list, I can tell you that our deck lists are very, very different.
Yeah, mine is the most different from when I started, because I thought I was going to be playing Devious Cover-Up. That's not good.
Yeah, I think that only lasted like an hour or 2.
It really did.
It lasted like a couple games before Sean was just off of it.
I was just like, 4 mana? It was time for that.
Oh, man. Do you remember when I first started playing this deck back in the day and I was playing Rewind? Because I was like, this card's great because you can counter spell and cast Mystical Teachings. But
vaguely?
That was when the deck was no Forbidden Alchemies. I think that was even before, like, Gurmag Angler.
It was before Gurmag Angler was printed. I think Forbidden Alchemy was printed, but it wasn't super popular.
It was, but it wasn't what was popular. It was just you were playing all the copies of Mystical Teachings, and the line of play was you have 4 mana, you cast Mystical Teachings to put another Mystical Teachings into your hand.
Yeah.
But that was the win conditions in that deck was Evankar's Justice plus Pristine Talisman or Capsize.
Yeah, and then just beat him down with Mole Drifters or something. I guess it was one or the other. Either you killed him with Mole Drifters or you had Evankar's Justice, I think.
I didn't have Mole Drifters in my deck. That was when Seagate Oracle was the card, not Augur Bolas.
So yeah.
We had no Gurmag Anglers.
That hadn't been downshifted yet.
Man, what a time to be alive. The deck was correctly playing Excludes over Soul Manipulations.
Yeah.
Which I think that people are starting to get off of soul manipulation now.
Yeah, I really did not like Soul Manipulation. It was one of those cards that was sitting in my hand and I was looking for value. I wanted to exile away all of my cards out of my graveyard to play like a Gurmag Angler, but I needed to find value for my Soul Manipulation, or it was just straight up a 3-mana counter your opponent's creature.
Yeah, that's what I found. It
Yeah.
was just 3 mana Essence Scatter 80% of the time.
Yeah, and then it found an Augur of Bolas the rest of the time.
Yeah, because you find that like you're very rarely on turn 3 just evoking a Mole Drifter.
You really don't want to do that. That's
Yeah.
losing value.
Yeah, not only is it losing value, but this format can be aggressive enough that you're just paying 3 mana to not affect the board. And that's just sometimes you just can't recover from that, even if you're untapping with a full grip of cards, because you're still constrained to 4 mana, and you've got to try to deal with everything your opponent's doing. And sometimes you're just like, well, my hand's just full of counter spells, but they've already like applied cards threats to the board that I need to deal with. So do I like tap my mana, deal with these threats, and then like let them resolve something else? I don't know. It just puts you in a really precarious situation. So I found that that's not what you want to do, and when that's not what you want to do, soul manipulation just becomes so much worse.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so hard to find that value. I started with 2 copies of soul manipulation in my main deck, and I'm down to 1. I think that like 1 is still fine. Like even as in a lot of cases 3 mana Essence Scatter is still okay, but Forbidden Alchemy, it just works really well with Forbidden Alchemy because you can hold them both up and then you can alchemy away, a creature. And so I think that having 1 has been good for me.
Oh, Alchemy. Oh, sorry, I didn't follow for a second there. I don't know, I was slow there.
Yeah, the namesake of the deck, Blue-Black Alchemy.
I was just like, alchemy away, and then I had to be like, okay, and then you put it in the graveyard.
You cast
that's what he's
Alchemy,
doing.
and you look at 4 cards, and one of them's a Mole Drifter, but then you take this counter spell, and you bin the Mole Drifter, and then you soul manipulation back the Mole Drifter that you had binned with Forbidden Alchemy.
Yeah, I think I tend to play control decks. I know how I play and how I want to sequence my spells, and I'm a little bit closer to like tap out control every time. Like I'm not like so afraid of putting my shields down because I'm only running 4 counter spells. I don't even want to use those. Those are like, this is my special card. It's gonna stop your special card. And that may never come, but I would rather do that. Like just tap out, play a Mole Drifter, and then play a whole bunch of kill spells and just overwhelm my opponent and just play Gurmag Anglers, just higher value creatures with my 1 card than theirs, and just have a lot of card advantage.
Yeah, see, and I'm a lot different. I don't like to tap out. I don't know. Like, you think, yeah, this is a creature-based format, but there are a lot of threats in this format that are not creatures that you need to have your mana up for. I feel like I was playing a match against it was Boros Bully. It was Boros Bully, and they just started resolving Lumathread fields, and like the first one is okay because I still have Evankar's Justice, but like I've boarded into my Nauseas and my Shrivels and stuff, and now those are just dead. So like the entire rest of that game, it was just like I can't let them resolve another Lumathread fields. Like if they do, my only out is just gone. And so I feel like there are things like that exist in this format. But I feel like we've talked about it before. Like, didn't we do a deep dive on control decks? Or at least we did a deep dive on like counter spells, maybe? I don't know. I feel like we've talked about like threat assessment and matchup knowledge is really important when you're playing decks like this. Just knowing like what sort of threats they could have. Because, for example, against like Stompy deck in game 1, I will tap out to get my Gurmag Angler into play as soon as humanly possible. Because I just know that matchup, I'm going to be able to untap and kill their things. I just need to stabilize the board somehow so I don't just get run over and swamped. But then there are certain matchups where I just know that, they've got things that I just can't tap my mana. Like, I've got to keep this counter spell ready for this thing, because if it resolves, I can't remove it and I die.
So kind of funny. I was like, okay, well, have we done just a control topic? And I searched for that, and then I also searched for counterspell, and we haven't done just counterspells yet, so that might be coming as a topic.
Maybe it was when we did removal?
Maybe it's when we did blue-black control in, like, episode 35. It's a good excuse. I'm not afraid to repeat topics, and meta's different.
He's afraid to repeat card of the week, though.
There's plenty of cards. There's only so many decks. And
Right.
It's the deck of the month.
Yeah, it was the deck of the month. So, for the faithful listeners who have been with us since episode 35, a whole 36 episodes ago,
Yeah.
well, I guess you're just going to have to deal with it. We're talking about it again.
It's so long ago. It was like a year ago.
Yeah,
That math doesn't work out, but
a lot has changed in this format since the last time we did a deep dive on the deck like this. So there were 3 whole cards that were still in the format. Golly, it feels so good. They're just like, man, turn 1 Delver, and I'm just like, I'm going to disfigure you, and I ain't scared.
Oh, it really does feel good.
Tap my swamp, disfigure you. You can't do anything because you tapped out.
Yeah, it's just like...
I have found, though, that they don't play Daze, so they play more mutagenic growths. That's what I've encountered from mono blue decks.
Yeah.
More mutagenic growths. So I guess, like, be afraid of that.
Yeah, but that feels better. I feel like it does.
I'd rather trade with that card than, I don't know. I guess, like, at the end of the day, is it really different? Like, Daze is slightly better because you've traded a card and they're behind on tempo. I don't know. Maybe it's just like a internal thing. Like, it just feels worse.
Well, no, I think it's that when you're disfiguring something and it gets mutagenic growth, one, you're relieved because they no longer have... You feel like you're trading a card for a card, and that's just fine. I think that was fine all along. Like, that interaction isn't different. It's when you're casting a spell that's supposed to get you ahead, like a Muldrifter, like when you've actually expended enough resources that they had to tap all of their mana to assert something, and then you just assert something that's a little bit bigger and way more card advantage, you feel safe.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Sweet. Well, should we just start with your deck list? Let's go through your deck list and let's talk about some of your decision points, card choices, etc. And we can talk about some of the experiences you had playing the deck. And then we'll do the same for me.
Okay, so my deck list, I run the 12 creature package. I just 4 Augur of Bolas, 4 Gurmag Angler, 4 Muldrifter. And I think this really lends itself to I want to play a closer to tap out version where I feel like all of my spells are just a little bit more powerful. The creatures are a big part of that. I had some of them cut at different points, and I was just like, this is what I just want to be doing. And I feel like, strangely enough, it gives you speed in matchups that you want to close out the game. So you don't give your opponent, like, outs. You're not trying to just lock them up. You're trying to overwhelm them. And then for my instance, I have 4 Accumulated Knowledge, 4 Counterspell, 4 Disfigure, 2 Doomblade, 2 Echoing Decay, and 3 Forbidden Alchemy.
Wait. Which figure?
Accumulated Knowledge.
Oh.
And then I have 7 Sorceries. I have 2 Chainer's Edicts, 1 Evankar's Justice, and 4 Preordain. And then just to finish this off, I've got 22 land. I have 1 Bajuka Bog, 4 Dimir Aqueduct, 4 Dismal Backwater, 8 Islands, 1 Radiant Fountain, and 4 Swamp. So a little bit on my card choices. I want to go back through. The 4 Accumulated Knowledge, I really like. game one, I think that they can be incredibly powerful. If your opponent is also playing accumulated knowledge, which is increasingly common, then it gets really awkward, and it's also it's my favorite card to cut out of the deck, but it's a card that feels really good when it's like, if you can chain a couple of these together, get a couple of these going, and I'm not even afraid to exile the Gurmag Angler. I think you can't be, because I want that little bit of tempo a lot of the time. I think I can make up for that card advantage in some other way, and I am concerned with tempo in this deck, even though it's a control deck. I don't want to be playing like Think Twice, where I'm investing 2 or 3 times the mana for the same amount of cards, even if for the first few cards that I find, it's less card advantage overall. So I really stand by accumulated knowledge right now. And then I guess other than that, I think everything's pretty standard. I really like the Preordains. Single Evankar's Justice has won me so many matches. And then I think, like the rest is pretty normal. I think Doomblade is a little bit weird, and I guess that would be the slot if I was going to put in an Agony Warp, where that would go. But I'm fine with Doomblade. I don't think there's enough black creatures in this format. Like, just all black creatures, I'm going to find value for it almost every time.
See, and I had Doomblade in my original deck list, like a one of in the main deck, and then I played against a bunch of mono black control decks, and I took it out.
Oh.
And then I played against a bunch of other stuff and realized, like, man, I probably just do need a Doomblade, so I put it back in. And then I played against a bunch of mono black control decks, and I was just like, what is my life?
I think that's like the thing that when people talk about results oriented thinking, that's exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Because I think the Doomblade belongs in the deck, and I found it useful enough against all of the 4 toughness creatures, like being able to just be like, boom, got your ATOG, got all your 4/4s.
The thing is playing against Boros decks. Like, I just like, they've got all those big guys in there, and sometimes like Disfigure just won't do the trick. You're just like, they've got Core Skyfishers, X3s, they've got the 2/4s.
Yeah, I think it's just too awkward if your deck just can't deal with an X4. Like, that's just not an acceptable thing to just never be able to do. And so the Doomblades, I think, are really good, and there's no alternative.
Yeah, otherwise you're playing like corner case, kill all their things, and then use your Chainer's Edicts to take care of what you can't kill, which that's not always reliable either.
Yeah. And then I'm going to leave the sideboard until later. We can discuss that together, I think.
Okay.
Do you want to go over your list?
Yeah. So my deck has actually got a lot of big differences from Sean's. I have 11 creatures and not 12. So I'm 4 Augur Bolus, 3 Muldrifter, 3 Gurmag Angler, and 1 Stormbound Geist. The reason for that was I was originally on the full 12 like Sean. And what I was finding is that, like, too often I would get into points where I would just be flooded with these creatures in positions where, I don't really want to be tapping out for them to just die. I'd rather keep my mana up for a removal spell or keep my mana up to cast a counterspell or whatever. And I would just be getting flooded with these creatures. And so I kind of cut back on them. And then I added a Stormbound Geist as just another cheap threat that I can apply to the board. Like, that's a threat that you can feel safe about just tapping out for on turn 3 and putting on the table, because it's so hard to remove that, and it kind of just, it's really good at stabilizing the board. It's just really bad against creature, like the aggressive creature matchups, because you can't block them. So, like, really bad against Stompy, but just really good against Delver decks. Like, you resolve this against a Delver deck on turn 3 and you're gold. I think going forward, this is probably one that would be on the cutting block for me too, though, going forward. Counterspell-wise, I have 4 copies of Counterspell, 1 copy of Dispel, 1 Soul Manipulation, and 2 Excludes. So I have a lot more Counterspells in my deck than Sean, which, again, I prefer not to ever tap out as often as I can. Removal, I have 3 Disfigures, 2 Agony Warp, 2 Chainer's Edict, 3 Echoing Decay, 1 Evankar's Justice. And then for my card advantage suite, I've got 3 Forbidden Alchemy, 1 Mystical Teachings, 2 Think Twice, 2 Preordain. Originally, I just had all 4 of these cards were Preordains, and then what I found was that the Preordains just kind of got worse as the game went on. I just wanted more cards. I didn't want that card filtration that Preordain gives you. But I found that early in the game, it was really nice to be able to in this matchup have a Preordain that I can cast early, try to dig to what I need to help me stabilize in the late game. And then later in the game, the Think Twices were just so good at, okay, I'm holding up my mana. Oh, they didn't do anything. Flashback this, Think Twice. It also just has a little bit more synergy with Forbidden Alchemy, which I kind of like having. When I have a card like Forbidden Alchemy in my deck, I kind of like having a few more options to okay, well, I can just bin this card and just it's free value. But I didn't honestly really consider accumulated knowledge, and maybe I should have.
Yeah, I mean
it's in all my Delver decks now.
I got to draw 6 cards with one of them, and I was on top of the world. It felt insane.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe I'll be doing that for accumulated knowledges. I don't know. I still kind of like the idea of having at least 2 Preordains in my main deck, though. So I'd have to open up a few slots. Maybe the Soul Manipulation and the Stormbound guys can go out, and I can do 2 Preordains and then cut the Think Twices and then just have 4 accumulated knowledges.
That's what I would do. I think the Stormbound Geist does belong in the sideboard. I think it belongs in the sideboard in great numbers. I've got 3 in my sideboard, and
I've got 2. So we both have 3 in our 75.
Yeah, and I just, when I'm playing decks, I try to have as few, this card just isn't very good in this matchup as possible. Any cards like that.
High variance cards as possible.
Yeah,
but
I think.
I feel like this deck has a lot, between the Preordains and the Forbidden Alchemies, this deck has a lot of ways to bin things that you don't want. You'll see that Stormbound Geist on top, and you'll either decide, this is going to be game-winning here, or it's going to be horrible, and you just put it in the bin.
But I feel like in your deck, you've cut a lot of those Preordains, and the Forbidden Alchemies aren't a super quick play. Those are usually turn 6, 5 or 6 for me most of the time. So I don't really count those into the equation most of the time. What I used them for most of the time was a boost. Okay, he just did this thing. I don't really have an answer for it. Or, oh, maybe I'll just take this opportunity, let him do his thing, do this, and then resolve a 1-mana Grimmaw Gangler. And that solves the problem, and now I'm ahead. I don't know, I didn't expect to feel so strongly about my 75, but my results were really, really positive. I think I had, let's see, I have my stats up here. It's close to a 75% win rate. Yeah, and it's hard not to feel...
How much mono black did you play against?
0.
See, I played against a ton of mono black, and that was a really hard matchup.
Yeah, I was fortunate, and I played a lot of mono blue Delver. And I think we're now getting into the matchups part, and let's just, that's fine, let's get into the matchups. But mono blue, that was such a good matchup. I would feel like I was behind, oh no, they're doing exactly what they want to do, and then all of a sudden, Evankar's Justice, oh, everything's okay now. Or Muldrifter, everything's okay now. Or I get ahead or something like that. Being able to just kill their guys, an Echoing Decay. There's just a lot of things that they can build up that tempo and get all this advantage, and then it just crumbles. That I loved that matchup.
I also feel like I had a pretty positive experience playing against Delver decks in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I played against Scred a couple times, and I played against Mono Blue a couple times. Scred felt like a really positive matchup for me. They just had so many dead cards in their deck, and then the Mono Blue deck still felt fine too. They just, like between Echoing Decay and Evankar's Justice, it just felt really good.
The only problem I had with what's it called, Scred Delver, was the games that I played against somebody that he had to have been on 3 or 4 Fire Ice, because it was like several turns in a row that he tapped down my bounce land, and that's what lost the games for me. It wasn't anything else. It wasn't any of the other cards. It was that.
And see, I was thinking about making a comment about Fire Ice tapping your lands, and then I was just like, well, people don't usually play like more than a couple. I don't think it's relevant. I've never seen more than like 1 or 2.
I feel like this is like, I think Blue-Black Control is kind of in a position to be one of the best decks in the meta. I think a lot of people will gravitate towards it just because of just how powerful these colors are together. And the Tron matchup didn't actually feel that bad, even.
I don't think the Tron matchup is bad.
Which is weird, because Tron is usually the control killer of the format. Like, it's just the slightly bigger deck, and that just didn't seem to be the case. It was just like, oh, I have the removal to deal with your flicker guy, and I'm just going to counter this, and then oops, you're being attacked for 7.
Yeah, I think that I have like, I don't know how many times I played against Tron. It was at least like 5 or 6 times. I only lost to it once, and like I want to say that game I was like mana screwed in games 2 and 3, but that matchup just feels really easy. Like, they kind of just like spin their wheels forever, like setting up all their mana and stuff, and then you just have all this time to just like set up like counterspell, removal spell. You're pretty free to just like jam your Forbidden Alchemies aggressively and just like fill your graveyard and just like, slam a Gurmag Angler as soon as you can, and that card's so hard for them to deal with.
Yeah,
and like,
it really is.
You can just clock them, and then you've got counter spells backing it up. I play a main deck Dispel, which makes the matchup so good for me too. Because there'll be times where I'm just like, they're like, Ghostly Flicker, set this up, and I'm like, counterspell it, and they're like, Condescend or whatever, and I'm just like, Dispel, and they're just like, concede.
I think Burn is an interesting one to talk about. It's not as negative of a matchup as you would think, because out of the board, I have some tech, but everybody runs at least some number of Dispels, Duresses, and then all of your kill spells are effective against that deck, that you don't have to do much, and Gurmag Angler is really good at racing that deck, so just taking a couple of cards means that they have to take a long time to kill you, and then if you take a couple of more, like, after board, I don't hate the matchup.
Yeah, I only played against it twice, and I lost to it both times, but it didn't feel bad. Like, I felt like, wow, I was really close to winning this game. Like, if my draw would have panned out a little differently, I think I win this game very easily. I actually did win one game in a match where after my opponent conceded, conceded to go to the next game, they like revealed their hand, and like it was just a bunch of Pyroblasts, and I had 2 Gurmag Anglers in play.
Yeah, that's why you don't play Pyroblast in Burn sideboards.
Yeah, or I don't think you board them in against Blue-Black Control.
You just don't play them. Ever. Because what are you doing? Protecting your bolts? Good thing you're taking bolts out of your deck to protect your bolts. Like, it just doesn't make logical sense.
I want to see how many people disagree with you. It makes sense, but I don't know. Maybe I don't pay good enough attention. I feel like, okay, very first deck list I look at, not a single Pyroblast. Boom. Got him. Don't play Pyroblast in your burn deck. Thanks for coming to Sean's TED Talk.
And then we've got Black-White Pestilence. I didn't play against this.
This matchups are rough too. That's why I have Agony Warps in my main deck to deal with that stupid Guardian. But black, white, and mono black control, I just have had the roughest time with. Your removal's hard because it doesn't line up very well with their creatures. Your edicts aren't great because the white decks have Thraben Inspectors. Like the black decks have, I played against Chittering Rats, mono black decks, like all sorts of stuff. And so a lot of your removal doesn't line up super well. They have access to just like tons of duresses and stuff in the sideboard. Sometimes like even in the main decks. I just had the hardest time with these decks.
That does seem like, I'll agree, like that seems like one of your worst matchups. And I don't know how much mono black control is going to be coming back into the meta. I would expect that is a pretty good deck, and I wouldn't mind playing it.
Especially with Black Scred.
Defile? Yeah.
Defile, is that what it's called?
Yeah, just Defile, I think.
Oh man, that card's so good.
Yeah, I'm excited to play Defile in a big way.
Oh boy. But yeah, I just really had a hard time with this deck. Every time I played it, I don't think I beat it like once.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you how many times I played against it. Like, I know it was pretty frequent, which is weird. I don't know. Were you playing competitive leagues?
I was.
I was all friendlies. So maybe that was the difference. I just played against tons of white-black, mono-black, and Boros Monarch, which is weird. Boros Monarch felt like a great matchup, and white-black Pestilence, mono-black, just felt really bad, which is weird. I don't know. I found that in Boros Monarch decks, I could just let them deck themselves. Okay, sure, be the Monarch. I don't care. Kill your guy. Evan Carr's Justice with buyback.
Yeah.
Use your clock or deck yourself. Those are your options. Because I'm not taking any game actions unless you take game actions, and you got to take twice as many as me. Cast my threat. Attack. Okay, kill it. Oh, okay.
This deck is pretty good at timing out your opponent. I will say that. I guess
that's what I should say about the Tron matchup. The Tron matchup feels good because they can't beat you. It's really hard for them to set up their 3-card lock, and you can just time them out. I feel like I've won most of my games against Tron because they just clock themselves.
And I guess I'll go back a little bit. I didn't play a lot of red-white Monarch or Boros Monarch. I'll use the right word. Boros Monarch. But when I did play against it the one time, it did feel pretty easy. Them becoming the Monarch didn't seem like that big of a deal or that hard to stop. So I had the choice of when I let it happen, and if I ever became the Monarch, which was, it was pretty easy when I would just be okay, well, I've just been Evan Carr's justicing you constantly, that finally they're well, I have nothing left in my hand. I'll go for it. It just wasn't a big deal, and I think I took it from them and they just scooped.
Yeah. I did play a game against Boros Bully. I felt so bad for this person. They just kept flashing back Battle Screeches. They just wouldn't play around sweepers. It was just turn 4 Battle Screech, flashback Battle Screech, and I'm just Shrivel?
Yeah.
Go? Next turn, Battle Screech, flashback Battle Screech. Nausea?
That's the only options they have. What are they doing? That's the whole point of their deck. They just have to roll the dice and be I really hope he doesn't have a Echoing Decay or something like that. Oh, he has an Echoing Decay. That's a really positive matchup. However good of matchup Boros Monarch is, a slightly more aggro creature dependent version of that.
It's just so much better.
Just is easier. Yeah.
Yeah. What about the Boggly Boys?
That one's a weird one. I have fear in my heart every time it happens, but then I'm just I won that? How did I win that?
Yeah. I had the same experience. My opponent just went I think they went the white the green-white gain a life land, Citadel. Is that what it's called? Whatever it's called. I don't know. They played that, and I was just like, oh no, is this Boggles? And they just like untapped Solana Ledgewalker. I was just like, oh no, I'm playing Boggles, I can't win. And then like 2 minutes later, they're conceding because I've like killed all their random little things and edict away all their boggly boys. The matchup just felt really easy.
And
like I played against it 3 times, and I'm 6-0. Like I didn't even drop a game. It just didn't feel hard.
I think it was a little bit harder for my deck to deal with, but still positive. Like, just like the amount your deck can transform to still deal with that deck, I think is where it's really good. Like the duresses and the shrivels, and then maybe an extra edict, like just all of those together, and then just like Evankar's Justice. Like you just have enough. Like, okay, get rid of all of your other guys, kill your big guy. Okay. Or, okay, you had a bunch of do-nothing enchantments and an Ancestral Mask that you were hoping to win the game with, and maybe a Rancor. Okay, well, I counter the Ancestral Mask or just, duress that out of your hand. Well, now you're attacking me with 3-1. 5 turns later, okay, I'm fine.
Yeah, I found that it wasn't difficult to just counter their big things, their things that would matter, take a few hits, and then resolve a Gurmag Angler with more counter magic backed up, and they can't attack into you anymore. And then eventually you resolve another Gurmag Angler or like a Muldrifter that you can start attacking with, and like it's just, it doesn't feel hard.
Yeah, weirdly, because it feels like something you can't interact with and is scary, but it just but you end up doing it.
Yeah, somehow our deck ends up having meaningful interaction for their like key pieces.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a bizarre concept because they play all these weird creatures to protect themselves from edicts. But like the best edict protection is just another Boggle. And so it's just really weird. Just like turn 1 Glade Cover Scout, turn 2 Young Wolf. And you're just thank you for giving me something to do with these disfigures. I will double disfigure your Young Wolf. I don't care. Like, you're just... these cards are going to rot in my hand anyway.
That is an interesting point.
Eat the thing away.
You don't take out all of your removal against this deck. Like, you leave a little tiny bit in there, just in case, like, a Gnarlid or something comes down. Like, you just don't know. Or like a Heliod's Pilgrim, you can just be like, okay, well, finally I have something to do with this. You don't leave a lot of them in, but...
Yeah, but I've found that all Boggles deck have, between the Cartouche that makes a soldier, a lot of them are playing Young Wolves that I've encountered. There's just always something to do with your removal spells. And I've found that it's just like, all it's ever done is just turned on the removal that was going to be dead in my hand anyway. But it's so weird because at the same point, it's like, well, if they didn't have those things, do I just edict away their only hexproof creature?
Yeah.
So it's very weird. It's very weird. But their plan, I just maybe feel like maybe Boggles just needs to have a stronger plan against edicts than trying to turn on all our other removal with random creatures to protect them. I don't know. It's weird. Maybe they just need to go for like some Tethmos action. So you can start getting their people back.
I did play against Burbman playing Tribe. Yeah, like post-ban Tribe. If honestly, if I had been playing a lesser deck, I would have lost. Like, that deck was still doing really good things.
Right. And I mean, I've played against Burbman, and I think he could just have, like...
That's true.
He could have any 75 cards covered in corrosive battery acid, and, like, he'd still find a way to just wipe the floor with me. So, I'm not really surprised that
I'm just bragging.
Well. Oh, you're just bragging that you beat him?
Yeah, but... No, but I really just wanted to say that, like, I was surprised how cohesive and scary that deck still was with Gushgone. Like, it was just its ability to change gears of like, okay, well, I do just have this win condition where I just play these 2 spells on my tribe and I win. Then there's also the win condition of like, Okay, well, I'm just gonna outvalue you. Okay, keep casting edicts. I'm just gonna keep casting things on my high priest. The problem with that strategy is it doesn't really have a way to win effectively. I didn't think. Most of the other stuff you just
That's when,
blocked.
don't you just get back Seeker of the Way every time and just start killing them with Seeker of the Way?
That's the idea, but you can block that most of the time. And if you
Yeah,
can't block it,
but then they have life. They gain
I'm
life.
I'm playing a control deck. I don't know.
But then you can't Evankar's Justice them because they have more life than you.
And they just don't have any way to interact. Like, eventually I just had 4 Gurmag Anglers out.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess last deck... there's 2 decks I still want to talk about. Elves and Stompy.
I have not seen any elves.
I didn't see any elves either, and I
didn't see any Stompy.
I didn't see any Stompy either. So everything after this point we say about these decks is just speculation. I don't even want to do it. I don't even want to go there. Draw your own conclusions.
Yeah, I think so. I've played elves. I've never played Stompy, so I'm trying to think of like what it's like being the elf player if I see blue-black. Putting myself in the shoes of the elf player, I imagine that this is a matchup I don't want to sit down across the table from.
Yeah. And with Stompy, I want to say that it's also something I don't want to see, just because of all of the, like, Augur of Bolas has constantly been posing a problem for Stompy. Gurmag Angler is extra tough. Yeah, I think there's just too many blockers.
Yep. Yeah. Should we talk sideboards?
Yeah. What was it you
Wrap it
start
up?
this time?
Okay, so my sideboard is different than Sean's because Sean's got some bangers that I don't have. My sideboard started with 4 copies of Hydroblast because I always just have the fear of burn. Like, that deck just puts the fear of God in me, and I'm just like, I'm not going to lose to burn. I hate it. I hate it. And now I have 0 copies of Hydroblast in my main deck, or in my sideboard.
Yeah.
But let's see. I've got 2 Duresses, 1 Diabolic Edict, 1 Shrivel, 1 Nausea, 2 Annuls, 1 Relic of Progenitus, 2 Nihil Spellbombs, 2 Stormbound Geists, 1 Dispel. Oh, I'm missing something. What am I missing? Oh, Doomblade. 2 Doomblades. That's what it was. Yeah, I made that change on Magic Online, and then I hadn't updated my paper version of the deck to match it. But yeah, 2 Doomblades is what it was. So one big difference between mine and Sean's is Sean doesn't have... Oh, no, I see it. You do have Nihil Spellbombs, just like me. I was going to say you didn't have any Graveyard Disruption, but you do. So I have a little more. I have 2 Spellbombs and 1 Relic.
I stayed away from that Relic.
I kind of like the 1 Relic just because, like, this card is so much more effective when you have it on, like, turn 1 or 2 at keeping those graveyard decks, like, at bay. I played a couple matches against Tortured Existence decks, and Spellbomb is sort of hard because against those, like, actual graveyard-focused decks, it's not difficult to put your opponent into a position where they have to pop their Nihil Spellbomb, and then you just, like, reload or whatever. But having, like, an early Relic of Progenitus was great because you just keep their graveyard low. That's sort of why I went with the split.
That makes so much sense in terms of how we're building the deck. Of, like, I'm just like, okay, my hate card, my Nihil Spellbomb, is going to bump me a little bit ahead in tempo because I've just made them waste something. And, you know, I'm just going to try to kill my opponent pretty soon after that. Or, like, that little bit of disadvantage that they just got just makes it so I can control them. And then you're more concerned with, like, more locking them out of the game, you know? Does that...
Yeah, because I know I'm not going to kill them probably as fast as you're planning on killing them. So I need a way to make sure that I can close the game out before they're able to reload themselves and play around the Spellbomb. Anything else? I feel like everything else is really similar.
Let me run through mine real quick, and then we can do a compare and contrast.
Yeah.
So I'll do the spicy one first. I have 2 Cartouche of Ambition. If you're not familiar, that is 2 colorless and a black for an enchantment. You enchant a creature. When it enters the battlefield, you may give a creature -1/-1 counter, and it gives your creature lifelink. This was like a multifaceted way to deal with a lot of decks. If I played against Stompy or Burn, really a lot of things is if I'm not super concerned about my creatures dying and they're fast at all, Cartouche of Ambition works wonders. Like if you're thinking about putting Hydroblasts in your sideboard, put Cartouche of Ambition in there anyway. Just putting this on an Augur of Bolas will win you the game. This is how I think it's a wonderful story, so I'm going to tell it. This is how I beat Boggles. Was I put Cartouche of Ambition on a Gurmag Angler, and then they were just like, okay, well I can't just kill him in one hit, so I have to stay back and block. Otherwise, we're just going to be trading damage, and he didn't have lifelink at the time, so that stabilized the board immediately. And then eventually I was able to draw into an edict effect and just double cast it, like front side, backside. I win. And I don't know. I've been really liking the Cartouche of Ambition. I could see going down to 1. I think that would be really reasonable if you had something else you wanted to stick in the sideboard. And then, other than that, I have a Diabolic Edict, 2 Dispels, 3 Duresses, 2 Nihil Spellbombs, 2 Shrivels, and 3 Stormbound Geists. So I think what I'm missing is a Nulls. I'm not really in the business of countering artifact spells almost ever, so it's not really useful for that. It's for the enchantments, and the enchantments I'm concerned with are specifically Boggles enchantments. So maybe even like another Edict effect might serve that slot better. But then again, like Burn is still a big deck. I want to just have like an auto win card against that, and then it does all of these good things against aggro and everything else.
Yeah, I'm pretty sold on the Cartouche of Ambition. That seems pretty cool.
Yeah, and
pretty nice deck.
I do have a little bit more creatures than you, so I don't know if that affects your decision on how many you play. That's probably a good reason to run like 1.
Yeah, it definitely would probably make me think about just playing 12 creatures. Geez, maybe even 13. I'll just keep the Stormbound Geist. Even in like the creature matchups, like, oh, I drew my Stormbound Geist, I'll put my Cartouche on it. They can't win.
Yeah, and I was thinking about cutting down on Stormbound Geist. Like, maybe this is excessive. My Delver matchup's already pretty good. And then after hearing how good Mono Black Control is against this deck, I kind of feel like that's one of my only tools to get a leg up on that deck.
Yep.
But yeah, I kind of wish I had more edicts that I had options to get into.
You have 3 in your 75?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have the same amount as me. I actually just found diminishing returns on too many. I just found there were times where I just like had 2 edicts in my hand and I was just like, man, these are bad. Like, I just wish these were 2 disfigures instead. I had that a lot, and so that's why I went down to 2 in the main deck. Because I started with 3 in my main deck and then a Chainers in my sideboard, and now I'm just down to the 2 main deck and the 1 Chainers, and I feel really happy about that.
I was just sitting there wishing I would draw an edict a lot. So, I don't know.
I was in situations, I found myself in the situations where I'm just like, hopefully I don't draw an edict.
If I added one, it would be to the sideboard.
Yeah, I could honestly feel like I could cut a Doomblade for like a second Diabolic Edict or a second Chainer or third Chainer's Edict. I think that like 1 Doomblade in my 75 is probably where I want to be at going forward. Because like I kind of do feel like in the matchups where the Doomblade is good, the Edicts are also generally good. And so the difference between like a third Edict in the sideboard over the second Doomblade is almost negligible. In most cases. Obviously, there are scenarios where, you know, like I was talking about with the mono black decks and the black white decks, where they just have enough silly creatures that, you know, you specifically need a way to kill one of their big things, and the Edict's not going to do the trick because they'll throw away their Thraben Inspector to it or whatever.
Yeah. But I guess other cards in the discussion that we don't have in our sideboards, but can be played. Crypt Incursion, I see a lot of people playing, and I'm not a fan of that card. Crypt Incursion is the one that says exile all creatures from target player's graveyard. You gain 3 life for each card exiled this way. So I don't think it's effective against burn. It's not going to be enough life gain. I think Cartouche of Ambition does that job better. And then some people play extra copies of Evenkar's Justice in the board, and I just think Shrivel does the job just fine.
Yeah, I think if I was ever a 2 Evenkar's Justice in my 75 deck, I'm a Pristine Talisman deck too. And I don't honestly believe that I want to be playing a Pristine Talisman deck. So I'm a 1 Evenkar's in my 75 kind of guy.
Yeah, the mileage you get on that card is a lot.
1 Lobbert in my deck is enough for me.
Oh my gosh. I think that should wrap it up. I don't have anything else to suggest or talk about, but I guess overall impressions, I really like where this deck is at. I had a lot of success with it. If there's more mono black control, I might change my tune. You?
Yeah, I like this deck. I enjoy playing this deck. The decision points can be hard. And that's kind of what I was saying at the beginning of the show. I was like, yeah, I don't get to play a hard deck again because I'm going to advocate we play like a linear deck this time around. But that's just sort of what happens when you're playing a deck that requires you to have, like your win percentage. You're going to eke out win percentages based on your knowledge of the matchups, your knowledge of the format, when to save counter spells, what to use your counter spells on, when you should just okay, I'm safe to just use your removal spell on this. When am I safe to tap out? There's just a lot of decision trees that are made from this deck, and it'll be nice. I'm gonna try to convince Sean that we should just play. Well, I think I was playing a league, and I just kept playing these super tough, tight matches, and then I just stopped it and started a league with Burn.
You're gonna try to convince me to play Burn?
No, that's not what I was saying.
Oh, okay.
I was playing a league with this deck.
Yeah, you just didn't want to play something.
And was just I don't want to think anymore. And I just started a league with Bird. And I was just I'm just going to throw Searing Blazes and Lightning Bolts at people.
Yeah, that deck's easy.
Yeah.
So what do you suggest?
I want to play Elves.
I was afraid you were going to say that. I can't play Elves.
Why?
I just hate it.
All right, well, I'm going to play Elves. What are you going to play?
We're playing different things. We just can't come to an agreement here.
I don't know. We probably could. What do you want to play?
Mono black control.
Oh,
I'm only into control decks. And
that
burn.
Sounds so miserable.
I can't play Elves. I tried. I was just okay. I think 1 month I was just deck of the month. It wasn't even deck of the month. It was before that. It was last summer. We were we should both gather data on Elves and let's do an Elves episode. And I'm actually staring at our topics sheet. And Elves has been at the bottom of that sheet of this is the next episode we're doing for 10 months or something like that. Because I played 3 matches and was I hate this. Fine, let's play Elves. We're gonna do it.
Really?
We're gonna be elfy boys.
Yes.
I can't always be stubborn and just not accept decisions you make. I do that too often. Okay, that's it.
End times.
All right, thanks everybody for listening. That was Common Knowledge episode 71. 71. And scroll back up to the top of the show notes. If you enjoyed what you heard, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/common knowledge. You'll get access to the graph. Well, that's actually just free. Everyone gets access to the graph. It's there on the Patreon webpage, but you don't have to be a Patreon to see it. You do, however, need to be a patron to have access to the Common Coliseum, as well as be eligible for our Card of the Week drawing. congratulations to Stephanie, who won last week. And of course, we're still working towards our first stretch goal, 5 for the 5-card blind tournament. More information on the webpage about that. Thank you to our sponsors, PureMTGO.com and InkGaming.com. Coupon code CCMTG10. Use it. Get yourself a discount on Ink Gaming accessories. And the last great way that you could support this show is to support the network that we're affiliated with. So go to Constructive Criticism on YouTube and like and subscribe and do the YouTube things. Not only would you be helping us and supporting a great network, but you just get all the great Magic content. So it's like a win-win. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can do so via Gmail at commonknowledgemtg@gmail.com. And you can find the show at CK Podcast MTG on Twitter, as well as Facebook. Just search for Common Knowledge. We've got a fun little group with a bunch of fun people doing Pauper things, talking Pauper, all that jazz. And if you would like to find Sean, you can do that on the Twitter at
Lobbert and the number 8. You can also find me on YouTube if you search for Lobbert.
Yep.
Have you pimped your Twitter yet?
I haven't. I'm going to do it right now.
Okay.
Go to my Twitter because there's no reason to.
Oh.
If you want to hear me talk about Pauper-related things and video game-related things, because that seems to be the extent of what I do on Twitter now, is I either engage about Pauper or I engage about Final Fantasy.
Yeah,
you can do that. If you're interested in that, you can go to bclark_ck.
I think that's fine. I mean, the only reason that there would be no reason, that makes sense, would be if you never posted anything. And you at least post, you're active, you'll respond. So I say follow Brandon on Twitter.
Yeah, do it.
Bye.